admit to the British people that this deal takes this country back under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, which is now able once again to overrule our courts, surrendering our judicial sovereignty?
Through the House on that basis.
Sir Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just point out to the Prime Minister that nothing can undo the fact that 17.5 million people voted leave, and they voted to take back control of our laws and to stop paying money to the EU. And that was a considerably larger vote than the 9.7 million who voted Labour at the last election. And now he is submitting to EU regulations without any control, and he is giving money, starting to pay money back to the European Union. He's giving up control over our laws and restoring payments to the European Union. He will pay a bitter political price for this betrayal.
My fishermen are furious that the Prime Minister has surrendered the fishing industry, and my constituents are furious that you've surrendered on freedom of movement and on rule-taking under the ECJ. But there is good news, Mr. Prime Minister. Do you accept that you've also surrendered the jobs of many of your backbench MPs in the next general election to reform?
Tensions erupted in the House of Commons as members of Parliament unleashed a relentless barrage of criticism at Prime Minister Keir Starmer, accusing him of quietly engineering a sweeping reversal of Brexit promises. The charges were blunt and unmistakable. Britain, after finally breaking free from the European Union, now appeared to be drifting back toward regulatory alignment, renewed budget contributions, and deeper judicial entanglements under Starmer's leadership.
He knows full well that we had a red line about not rejoining the EU, no single market, no customs union, no freedom of movement. We were told it was impossible to negotiate a better deal with the EU with those red lines. We've just done it. We've also showed that we are outside the EU because he will appreciate that having a deal with India and the US is inconsistent with membership of the EU. Could be no better evidence that we're not going back into the EU, nor are these negotiations on that basis. I know he understands that very, very well. I'm surprised at the way he puts his question. As for control of the borders, honestly, it went from quadrupling net migration after Brexit to nearly 1 million. That wasn't controlling our borders. It's a complete lack of control on the other side. Mr. Speaker, on the question of payments, I do think it's important to appreciate that we've achieved unprecedented access to EU markets without the budgetary payments of member states. That is an incredible achievement. The only payment under the SPS agreement are administrative costs to support the relevant costs of implementing and administering the scheme. For schemes and payments where it's in our national interest, we will negotiate proportionate contributions, as already happens under the deal negotiated by them, for example, in relation to R&D and into Horizon.
The opening salvo came with a blunt reminder that 17.4 million people voted to leave the European Union. Many MPs argued that decision was never just about trade. It was a demand for sovereignty. Sovereignty over borders, sovereignty over money, and above all, sovereignty over British laws. Yet critics say the current direction under Keir Starmer appears to be erasing those red lines. EU regulations, they claim, are quietly creeping back. Financial contributions to European frameworks are returning. And the one thing Leave voters wanted most, control, is beginning to feel further out of reach. What stings even more for some MPs is how this shift is being presented as a diplomatic victory. Starmer's administration has promoted renewed access to EU markets as a breakthrough. But according to his opponents, that access carries a heavy cost, a surrender of control dressed up as cooperation.
For a youth mobility scheme to help get their youth unemployment figures down. So can the Prime Minister tell the House what impact assessment he has done on his youth scheme for youth unemployment for young Brits, particularly white working class boys who suffer the most? And can he tell the House today the cap he has put on numbers for people coming into the UK? If he can't, this is a bitter betrayal of British youth.
The issue of immigration reignited deep frustrations across the Commons. MPs pointed to post-Brexit migration figures that defied expectations. Net migration had not only failed to fall, but had surged to nearly 1 million in recent years. For those who backed Brexit on the promise of tighter border control, this felt nothing short of a betrayal. But it wasn't just about the numbers. The Prime Minister's recent push for a youth mobility scheme with the European Union raised eyebrows across party lines. Critics viewed it as an economic lifeline for Europe's struggling youth rather than a policy designed to benefit Britain's working class. Countries such as France and Spain, where youth unemployment has remained persistently high, appeared poised to gain the most. The elephant in the room was the potential impact on British young people, particularly white working-class boys, a group consistently underrepresented in higher education and skilled employment. MPs demanded answers. Where was the impact assessment? Where was the cap on incoming migrants? And where were the guarantees that this would not become a backdoor return to free movement?
Young people in the United Kingdom the opportunity to work, to study and to travel in Europe. It is going to be a capped scheme of limited duration and with visas, something, again, everybody said we couldn't negotiate. We have negotiated. And in relation to her question about what we're doing for young people in this country, she should look to the trailblazer schemes that we set up that are helping young people back into work.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The most pernicious part of this deal is dynamic alignment, by which we become an automatic rule taker from the European Union. Labour have been briefing journalists. We have an opt-out from that. I've read the document in detail. We don't. And besides, the ECJ is the ultimate arbiter in a dispute. It is, so the EU will always win. Why, Prime Minister, when the British people voted peacefully and democratically to leave the European Union, have you surrendered that right and made us a rule taker to the EU once again?
Starmer's government insists the scheme is capped, temporary, and structured around visas, something they claim was once considered impossible to negotiate. But opposition MPs remain unconvinced. At the heart of the Commons clash lies a far more fundamental concern: Britain's legal autonomy. For many MPs, the Brexit mandate was never just about trade or migration. It was about ending the European Union's grip on British law. Yet critics argue the latest agreement risks rolling back that hard-won independence. The deal's opponents point to a clause known as dynamic alignment, a mechanism requiring the UK to remain in lockstep with evolving EU regulations in certain sectors. In their view, this would effectively reduce Britain to a passive rule-taker, compelled to follow decisions made in Brussels without having a meaningful voice at the table.
Just on the question of how the rules are made, they will go through a parliamentary process in this House. In this House. We are already aligned. We are in alignment. We are just not getting the benefit of it. This gives us the benefit which will be counted in the business, jobs and bills that we can deal with this. And in relation to an independent arbiter, there's independent arbitration where there's disputes in this agreement. They all know this. Every trade deal has an arbitration clause to deal with the settlement of disputes. All trade deals have that, including all the trade deals that they have negotiated. On the question of the ECJ, if there's an issue of European law that needs to be referred by the independent arbitrators to the court, they then give a ruling on the interpretation. It passes back to the arbitrators to make the final decision. That is how trade deals work. But I do understand their new policy. Their new policy is against any trade deals. That's never been the Conservative Party policy before, but it's good that we've got clarity now.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Boston.
And then came the issue of the European Court of Justice. Though the government insists that arbitration under the New Deal is independent, MPs highlighted the ECJ's continued role in interpreting disputes involving EU law. To them, this suggests British courts could once again be overruled by a foreign judiciary. The government pushed back, framing the arrangement as standard international practice. Arbitration panels, they argued, are part of virtually every major trade deal worldwide. In those rare cases where interpretation of EU law is required, the ECJ provides a legal opinion that arbitrators then use to reach a final decision. But for many on the backbench, that explanation fell flat. Among the most impassioned voices in Parliament were MPs speaking for Britain's coastal constituencies, areas that had voted overwhelmingly for Brexit, while holding tightly to the promise of a fishing revival. For these communities, the European Union had long symbolized economic decline and foreign control over British waters. Brexit, they believed, would finally restore that legacy. Yet MPs from regions like Boston and Skegness argued the reality has been very different. Local fishermen, once hopeful, now feel sidelined. New agreements, they say, continue to prioritize EU access over UK sovereignty, offering little real protection to the livelihoods of those who depend on the sea. For them, the issue goes beyond quotas. It has become a question of betrayal.
Skegness, my fishermen are furious that the Prime Minister has surrendered the fishing industry, and my constituents are furious that you've surrendered on freedom of movement and on rule-taking under the ECJ. But there is good news, Mr. Prime Minister. Do you accept that you've also surrendered the jobs of many of your backbench MPs of the next general election to reform?
Well, I'll happily explain to his constituents the huge benefits of these deals measured in jobs that will be saved, jobs that can now thrive, bills that will come down. And it is really important for our economy that we have these deals. That is in the interest of his constituents. It's in the interest of the whole country.
Gregor Poynton.
Beyond fishing, the wider concern is what these decisions signal about the future of British industry and national identity. Constituents are watching as freedom of movement appears to return in new forms, as rule-taking under the ECJ quietly creeps back in, and as their communities are left with more questions than answers. In a striking political warning, MPs made it clear this perceived betrayal will not just cost jobs in fishing villages. It could cost the Prime Minister his majority. Reform UK, the rising right-wing challenger, is gaining ground. And if nothing changes, Starmer's backbench may soon find themselves out of office. The closing salvos in the Commons were not only about ideology, they were about economics. Even MPs who supported certain areas of EU cooperation demanded answers. If the UK is already aligned with European food and safety standards, they asked, why accept a deal that gives the European Union the power to dictate future changes? This, they argued, was the moment Britain should have pushed for mutual recognition, an arrangement in which two trading partners accept each other's standards without requiring constant alignment. Other countries have secured such terms. Why couldn't Britain? The concern was not abstract. If the EU tightens its standards tomorrow, UK businesses would have little choice but to comply or risk being shut out of the European market. And because of dynamic alignment, that compliance could come without any meaningful say in the rules themselves.
British people, that this deal takes this country back under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, which is now able once again to overrule our courts, surrendering our judicial sovereignty.
No, I mean, that's just wrong under the agreement. There's an independent arbitration. It's the same. It's the same as the Windsor framework, which you negotiated. It is an important point. It's an independent arbitration process. There's the same process for pretty well every trade deal that's struck, not just by us and other countries, but most other countries. In this particular case, if the independent arbitration needs reference on a point of law, it's referred to the ECJ, which then refers it back to the independent arbitrator to make a decision. So that's how it operates.
Josh Dean. Speaker. Can I thank the Parliament? If the Prime Minister is right that our food standards are already in a...
Critics argued this wasn't merely a missed opportunity. It signaled that Britain had returned to the negotiating table with its hands partly tied and its leverage weakened. In response, The Prime Minister's allies highlighted the broader benefits: market access, lower bills, and more stable business conditions. But to those on the opposition benches, the message sounded all too familiar. For them, the entire arrangement looked like a quiet return to EU membership in everything but name. And for many who backed Brexit, this wasn't cooperation, it was capitulation. The debate over Brexit is far from over. For many MPs and voters, the latest deals appear less like progress and more like a subtle return to the EU's influence. From migration to legal rulings to trade rules, the promises made in 2016 now feel increasingly uncertain. As political pressure mounts and Reform UK gains ground, the question remains clear. Has Britain truly taken back control, or has it given it away again? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want more updates like this, hit like and subscribe.